All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to C-Suite Network Thought Leaders Digital Meeting. I'm Greg Greenberg, General Manager for C-Suite TV. Today's featured guest is Jeffrey Hayzlett, a leading business expert and a global business celebrity. He's also my boss and a heck of a nice guy. The event title, it's going to be all about how to own your CEO brand online, and Jeffrey's going to have a great presentation he's going to bring on in a second. But before Jeffrey does his presentation, I want to say a little bit more about Jeffrey Hayzlett. I'm going to read you his bio here. It's big, so I'm just going to give you a part of it. You can look online for the rest. So he's a primetime TV and radio host, keynote speaker, best-selling author, and global business celebrity. He's a global business celebrity, primetime TV host on C-Suite TV, a radio host on CBS's Radio's Play It and C-Suite Radio. From small businesses to international corporations, his creativity and extraordinary entrepreneurial skills have enabled him to lead ventures, blending his leadership perspectives, insights into the C-suite and business strategy, mass marketing prowess, and affinity for social media. He's a well-traveled public speaker, the author of the best-selling business books, The Mirror Test and Running the Gauntlet. Also, he's got a brand new book, The Hero Factor, coming out soon. He's also one of the most compelling figures in business today. He's also a heck of a nice guy, and once again, a friend of mine. So I'm going to turn it over to Jeffrey Hayzlett now, and he's going to talk about how to own your CEO brand online. Once we're done with the presentation, we're going to be back for some Q&A, so start thinking of questions right now. Here you go, Jeffrey.
Hey, thanks so much, Greg. I appreciate that. And Greg's going to mute so that we have a little bit better on the sound, and we'll just follow along. I want to bring up a set of slides for you, and then I see a lot of great people that are on here. I appreciate all of you sharing your day with us, sharing the next half hour to an hour, depending on how much time we've got. We'd love to have you, and we're just so glad to have you be a part of this today. And to talk a little bit about branding yourself, as a CEO, because it's just something that we all have to start to look at. So I'm going to take you through a couple of my thoughts here, both being a former chief marketing officer and now, of course, being a CEO myself. I totally understand the need to do a lot more than I used to do when I was the CMO and now moving to a CEO role. So let's talk a little bit about how we might be able to do that. Okay, let's see if I can get the slides going. There we go. So I want to talk to you about owning your CEO brand online. And first of all, I want to kind of focus in on the old model versus the new model, because it's totally changed. So I'm going to cover about 14 different points here today, some key themes for us to be able to think about, and then we'll get to your questions. So make sure that you utilize the little box on the side to write down a question so you don't forget, and we'll try to take them in order or take them in the best level that we possibly can. So let's talk about old model versus new models, because the old models, the CEOs used to sit behind the scenes, and now they're way out front in the middle of everything. And the new model brings the CEOs to the spotlight. We used to have this whole landscape of like analog versus digital, and now digital is the big thing. But then we moved from what we would call broadcast to narrowcast, and even into what we call segments of one. And so it used to be that we would have 1-800 numbers, and we would have telephone trees, and then you have info@yourcompaniesname.com in order to get a hold of the key people inside of your operation, or even to try to reach a CEO. And CEOs used to have in fact, many companies, big companies, have large correspondent teams to be able to answer it. But what's different in today's world is we're so instant, especially with social media and being able to reach people, and the need for us to be able to reach people when emergencies occur, problems occur, or even good news occurs for our company. So the old model versus the new model is much different. And so I want to talk to you about building this online brand in what we call the new digital economy. As I mentioned before, there's a very strong digital influence, and you have to make your company stand out. Now, it used to be that the models themselves were very top-driven. They were traditional innovation, executives at the very source of the inspiration, and they had key drivers of existing assets and products. And now we're seeing deep observation of customer needs. So it's changed. We really have customer-driven innovation. And so as a CEO, you don't want to stand behind or set up in the ivory tower and not be able to see this. So having your brand out front and in front of people is very important. And the customer involvement used to be very structured, and now it's very spontaneous. The process used to be very linear, structured. You know, we had large strategic teams that set out in front of us that had input on this point and this point and this point. But with everything that's a strong digital influence, we can actually get it as we go and innovate as we go and reiterate as we go. So that's really important for us to basically control the chaos that's out there. And so the corporate posture used to be to go out to the customer, and now really truly we're in an age in this strong digital influence of really inviting the customers in. And so our needs assessment need to be, you know, formally very explicit, but now they're also not explicit, they're also latent. And we used to have tools like surveys and focus groups and storyboards. Well, all that stuff is dead. For the most part, we still have some surveys, but not like it used to be. I mean, when I was a CMO of Eastman Kodak, I had a $98 million research budget. And by the time I left, it was well under 30 million. So that has declined as we have this digital influence that we have today. So today you can do it through search, through emails, through blogs, through smart POS, and also from, you know, the internet itself. So I want to be able to talk to you about that. So with that becomes a restructuring of social reputation in a digital era. And then what is your reputation? So I wanted to spend a little bit of time with that, about the branding approach for business leaders and how to live your brand. I mean, a brand is nothing but a promise delivered. I mean, that's really critical for us. When you think about a brand used to be something that we always put on a cow and occasionally a horse. That's where, you know, I'm from South Dakota. That's where we used to identify our livestock on the side of a bovine or inside of a horse. And now really brand has been able to be traditioned as, you know, a promise delivered. It used to be that the worst thing that you could say about your brand or about you as a CEO was nothing, okay? Now, with the way that digital is at the forefront, they can say anything about you and whether it's true or not. And so the key is to be able to control as much as you can, or to influence or to drive your own reputation, not only of your company, but of you. Because typically now when we see the CEO, we see the company. When we see the company, we see the CEO. They're never apart anymore. They're always linked together. So it's very important. So it's important for you to be able to figure out those pieces. So I want to talk about putting CEOs in the spotlight, because I think it's very critical for us as we think about it, because CEOs are now becoming real thought leaders. Now, of course they are, because they're the experts of running the business itself, but more so we're starting to see them as the category leaders, as the innovators, as the person who represents the brand. Now, again, I'll just take it back to when I was at Kodak. I used to have these really feisty discussions, or healthy debates as we might call them, with my own CEO, because I would say, well, I own the brand. He goes, no, I'm the CEO, I own the brand. And of course I had to concede that point. My job was to water it, nurture it, feed it, do the things I needed to do as a CMO. But he was saying, or she, if you're a she of a CEO, your CEO, a female, you should say, yeah, I own the brand. You own the brand essence. You own the shepherding of that brand itself. And so that's really important for a CEO to be able to do that. And so they have to be representative of the brands that they live. So they have to be live, and they have to be, personify the brand. You think about some of the people that personify the brand today. Elon Musk. Certainly Steve Jobs did that when he was alive. So that's what you typically see. Warren Buffett's another great example of that, where you see the brand itself with the person. And so like a Warren Buffett, you see, and I saw him not too long ago in New York City hailing a cab. Now that's interesting, because that fits with Warren Buffett's brand of never going too far out and living in his house in Omaha, the same house he's had for many decades, just a small little tiny house in the middle of Omaha. So again, living the brand. So let's talk a little bit more about that. So we're in a new era of branding for CEOs. It's different. It's a lot different than it used to be. We used to be able to sit in our little ivory towers and be the CEO, never have to venture out very much. and it's just not that way anymore. So we have to take advantage of those digital mediums. So, and this is very helpful for us to be able to utilize the platform to amplify our messages, to be able to be where the customers are, to be in rich conversations with opportunities. You know, obviously being and having your brand online, it's a low barrier of entry and cost. And of course, it leads to speed to problems, speed to opportunities. And certainly will expand your reach to shareholders, to customers, and to employees, and which is really critical because a lot of times inside of a company, a CEO's got to go through this person to this person to this person to this person to get to all of these people. And so with your ability to brand yourself online and with your ability to brand yourself as a communicator, as a thought leader, as a category leader, and as the channel leader, and we'll talk about the difference between a category and channel in a moment, it gives you the opportunity to really to get to those people directly in mass. So instead of going one-to-one to one-to-one to one-to-many, you get to go to one-to-many very quickly. And that's very important because as brands themselves are, they're really an extension, you know, again, of the company, but you have personified that in terms of the people and in terms of the brand, and so you're the person that's best representative of that. So I think it's very critical for us to take a look at. And so we also need to build that trust and mass connect with the customers. I talked about one-to-many, and to be able to spread your influence online. You know, when I was the chief marketing of Eastman Kodak back then, many years ago, I named the very first chief blogger. In fact, there'd never been a chief blogger of a company until I named the very first one. Jenny Cisney was her name. And it took a lot of heat about that because I called the person chief blogger. I also named the very first chief listening officer as well. And nobody had done that in the evolution of the digital world. But one of the things that the communication teams came to me and said, well, we want the CEO to blog. Well, I'm all for the CEO to blog, but they wanted him to be the primary blogger for our company. Well, if you take the persona of Kodak at that time, it was about the chief memory officer, and the chief memory officer for any family was the female. All right, the woman, the head of household, the mother, or a single mother. And so what you typically would see, the last person I need to have is a 58 or 62-year-old male, be the person that's our chief blogger. Wanted to make it more indicative of the brand. Now, that didn't mean that the CEO doesn't have a role in that. The CEO had a role in being the leader of the company. And so there's one thing to make it the brand versus the other thing to brand himself or to do that. So CEOs really truly need to own the company narrative to spread the story with great influence, because when a CEO opens his or her mouth, they speak for the entire company. And so it's important for them to have a voice. And typically most CEOs only come out when things are negative. Think about that. They only come out when things are negative. They respond. They have to be the person up in front of the camera when things go wrong. How about being out there when things go right? And so it's a great opportunity in this new era of branding for CEOs to do that. The other piece of this is that character loyalty is a path to brand loyalty. Okay, this is really a great quote by Napoleon Hill. People buy personalities as much as merchandise, and it is a question if they are not influenced more by the personalities by which they come in contact than they are by the merchandise. I think that's pretty true. Remember Victor Kayyem? He was so impressed with the company, he bought the company. And so that was an old quote. So you want to think about how your personality reflects that of the brand and the brand reflects you. Again, I've said this 10 years ago when I wrote one of my very first books, The Mirror Test. When I see the CEO walk in the room, I see the company. When I see the company, I see the CEO. So they're implicitly connected one-to-one and together. So think about how brand loyalty impacts that. And so brand loyalty to products is directly influenced by CEOs. So it's important for you to start to have that online presence, for you to have a place to go, for others to see who you are other than Wikipedia or other than what people say about you in chat rooms, because that's somebody else who's saying. Remember I said the worst thing that can happen is that no one says nothing? Well, the worst thing that really happens is they say everything. So don't you want to be able to start to position yourself and be represented? I got to tell you, in Wikipedia, for instance, a great example, constantly have editors changing my own profile, and I'm fairly visible. I don't want other people controlling who I am and what I am. They certainly have an input on that, but I want to be able to have a voice in that too, a bigger and share voice of that. So CEOs lacking a strong personal brand affect the bottom line. I'll guarantee it. Guarantee it. If they like the CEO, they're going to feel more comfortable with the CEO. They'll want to invest with the company. They'll want to buy the products. They'll feel better about when things don't go right. There's all kinds of things. So CEOs hold the key to influence when it comes to customers, shareholders, employees. All right, and they need to have a direct connection with consumers and shareholders. Now, I'm going to talk about a couple of different ways today. How do you get a hold of a CEO? You got to go to info@companyname.com. Well, if you had your own Twitter account, you had your own Facebook account, you had your own LinkedIn that didn't have a stupid yahoo.com or whatever, and it's really your company address or your personal address, wouldn't that say a lot more? Because people connect with stories, ideas, and they connect with personal characters. Again, let's think about those people who have very positive brand influences and the fact that people follow them and invest in them, and it moves markets, and we've seen that with a number of people recently. Mark Zuckerberg, certainly Bill Gates, Elon Musk, I point to again. Those are some of the real positives and sometimes negatives. So you have to have, it has to reflect who you are. So if you're not that good, it's also going to reflect that too. You can't fake it. Right? So think about your how to share your own brand message. I call this OPM, other people's money, okay? And this is a real good way for you to be able to utilize it, again, creating a great asset for the company by having that online presence, by being a bigger entity, okay? Personality, you're going to get speaking engagements, contributed articles, you got media moments, you could publish your own book, you can advertise, you could have your own personal website. In fact, I'm going to be a real strong advocate for you to control your own personal reputation, all right? Because I didn't say this at the beginning, but I know there's a slide a little bit later, but the average tenure of a CEO is around 9 years. 9 years. Now, the real tenure of a CEO is around 4.8 or something like that, which your optimum performance as a CEO. For CMOs, it's about two years now, but for CEOs, a little bit longer, so I'm glad to be a CEO. So I want to talk to you about how to be able to drive that and make it a factor in your corporate reputation. So by having that reputation, it has major monetary value. Okay, you will affect shareholder prices, you will affect earnings, you will affect the value of what you even charge for the product, especially the more your brand is tied to a personality. Because I saw some of the people that are on this, some of you are personalities, okay? But if you're running a big company, your own personality will have an effect on the bottom line and certainly the top line of the company. All right. I got to move fast because we're running out of time, and I want to maybe get to a couple questions. So get in front of the media, pitch in the news, provide feedback, get back out there. It's okay. And you know what? You're going to make some mistakes, and it's okay to make a few mistakes. Think about doing your own book. Think about telling the story of your experience. It's good for business, and we're starting to see a lot more businesses and a lot more CEOs step into the space, and I'd be more than happy to help you in any way I can. So think about the social integration that starts at the very top. If you're doing it, then the other folks will help you. Imagine turning in thousands or tens of thousands of employees into advocates for the brand, where they're all brand ambassadors. So you can integrate across all levels, and it's very important for you to be highly present where most of your target lives, okay? So if your target mostly is on Facebook, then you should be active on Facebook or in Instagram, although it's got to really tie to your personality, okay? Got to really tie to your personality, so that's important. So the other piece of it is own your channel. Now that's different than the category. I would tell you as a business, first thing the business should do is own the category. And then as you and the CEO, you should own that channel where your audience primarily lives and then dominate it. So identify and define what is best for you as a channel and then communicate your message as a CEO. So imagine, like I know that Facebook is very big for Walmart. Imagine if Walmart's CEO was in there a lot more often. Imagine the role that would play in their brand's presence online. And it's great to see a number of CEOs who are active in this way. So go where your prospects spend their time and be there. Use video, contribute to industry content, use the speaking engagements, your video if you're on C-Suite TV, or if you're on C-Suite Radio, or if you're on any other network that might be out there. What makes the most most sense for you? What platform is best for you? Then use that, because not everybody has is eye candy. Okay, so you maybe have a face for radio. So find those things that best suit you. Maybe it's a blog. Maybe it's just contributing photo. I know Peter Friedman. I'm on his board. It's a publicly traded company that does moderation of social communities. And Peter is a great photographer. And so he uses photography as one of the things that he extends his brand and the meaning and sense of that brand. And I think that's a great thing, not only for him personally, being the artistic person he is, but also in terms of the brand and putting a face and personality to it. So what are the things you know when you're first establishing your CEO reputation? Establish a reputation early in your career. That would be great if you thought about this early, if you were young and you could do that. But the next best day is today. So start to build it and get your name known. And don't conform to the mold. Be yourself, okay? I mean, I don't wear ties. I wear jeans. I wear a jacket. I wear cowboy boots. Be you. Okay, and be transparent, be real, authentic, and be personal, but be you. So you don't have to look like every other CEO that's out there, okay? And then things you should know before you exit. Now, because you're going to leave, folks. You are going to leave. I mentioned this a little bit earlier. The average tenure of a departing S&P 500 company CEO is 9.7 years. Temple University study suggests the optimal tenure of a CEO is 4.8. So click, tick, 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 tick. And if you're doing your job, you're leaving the company, right? Because you're bringing on new leadership. Maybe you're going to move to chairman or chairwoman. And so those are some of the key things. So create a personal brand identity that you can own and control. It's important for you to think about what's going to happen after you leave the company. Now, your whole identity is usually tied to that company, so it's important that it's tied to the position and role, because you've earned it, and because you've earned it, you might as well own it. So the public feels, again, connected to the person, not the company. So when you move from one company to another, many CEOs do, then already have that brand presence. By the way, won't that add to your value as a CEO? Because you do have that personal brand out there, that you've owned it and you control it and you nurture it and build it and and dominate it. And so by doing so, that adds to your value as well. So the next thing you need to do is protect it. So you've worked your whole life to be a CEO. It defines who you are. It defines what you have achieved. So let's protect that brand. And so once a CEO, always a CEO. And so your domain is an extension of your brand. So one of the things, and this is a little bit of a commercial, we own and participate with .CEO. So a number of years ago, about 7 to be exact, ICANN, the International Committee of Assignment of Names and Numbers, had me go out around the world and help evangelize other forms of top-level domains. We basically created 4. First was entities, so it's things like Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts. And then there was other groups like New York, Orlando, Chicago, and others. And so all of those groups, so now you have a .NYC. Then there were things like categories, and I called them category killers. So you could buy .kosher, .movie, .music, and so a number of them that were open up, and and then there was also the category, .CEO. And then the 4th area was brands. So brands could buy themselves. So .Coca-Cola, .Comcast, .Kodak, .Xerox, so forth. And so that opened up thousands of new top-level domains. And one of those is .CEO. So now you can own your domain, your name, .CEO, and that's available for you today. So it will help improve your search. It'll help you build a strong presence across all the platforms. So this is something that you might want to look at today. So this is the little commercial before we sign off here, is go claim your .CEO today. So if you go to claim your, all right, write that down, claimyour.co today, and register your domain. It's $149 a year, and you can have your own personal web address and secure your CEO brand. And with that, you can build your own profile. It helps with your search and search rankings because they find you quicker. You can see mine's right there. This is one of the big things with top-level domains, having those different categories. It really reduced your dependence on having to buy your own name because it is your own name, and you shouldn't have to do that. So, and then gives you your own profile. So here happens to be my profile where I'm starting to build my own online presence outside of my personality and the media and things that I do. And so this is another great example of that. Okay, Greg, I think I'm at the very end of this, and so I'm going to unshare the screen, and maybe we want to take a few questions from everybody. Let me see if I can unshare. I've got to be able to find the share button here.
Absolutely. All right, so we do have a lot of questions. You can take a little bit of break. That was a fantastic presentation.
Actually, I'll just move the slide a little bit. I can't find out where it's at. Oh, there we go. There we go. Thank you. I got it back. I apologize.
All right. So I think the first
question.
It's
a good thing I'm good at marketing and talking and not at the technology of our program. There we go.
All right. So the first question I think we'll take from Jennifer Mergen. She says, what are your thoughts on the inundation of people using social media for this purpose? How does a new voice become authentically noticed without playing the bot, pod, like for like, follow for follow game? I guess there's a lot of CEOs who want to get out there and spread their wisdom. How do you kind of stand out?
You know, Greg, I think that's a great question. And I think the most important thing is this is not a game anymore about eyeballs and ears. It's not. We played that game for a long time, and I know it makes you feel good to have. And I've got 600,000 followers on Twitter, tens of thousands on Facebook, and so forth. I'm just getting kind of started on Instagram because I've not been really a real picture taker or image person. So, but I used to really truly believe it was about, that's the old motto was broadcast and throw it out there and get as many numbers as you can, throw them down the funnel. This game today is about hearts and minds. So Jennifer, it's a great question. Don't worry about all of that. Just be you, build your brand, build it organically, build it the way you should build it, and that is by just being really good at what you do, and the rest will follow. It's not a game about where I need 10,000 likes. I just need, for business, in business to business, I just need the right 10. Not 10,000. So if you really concentrate on doing that, the rest will follow, and don't play that game. Don't play the personality game anymore. It's just not. First of all, it's not worth it. Second of all, it's never going to happen. And so you're much better being good at what you do than trying to be famous at what you do.
All right. Another question is from Christopher Vitrano. From your perspective, what lessons learned can CEOs take from the quick ousting of GE CEO John Flannery? Such short-term tenure for the GE CEO in particular was unthinkable. What was the big mistake that today's CEO should avoid?
Have a plan. I think that's the most important thing. And the other thing I think you have to do is really truly build confidence with your audience. Look, had he had a better persona, had he better presence, had he been known better, he might have been able to withstand that had he had the public behind him. That's one piece of it. I'm not saying that we have to cater to that, but my point is, you have to surround yourself with a good audience. You have to speak to that audience, and you can't just sit in that ivory tower anymore. And so but I do believe, had you had a persona, had you had a reputation that you were protecting that was more public, I think it's a little tougher to have that happen to you.
I have a question for you. You named a few CEOs who kind of put themselves out there. One of the people you named was Elon Musk, and a lot of people say he might have put himself too far out there. So how do you know when you're kind of at the edge of sharing too much, if you will?
Well, I think for Elon, it happened, right? There was a negative backlash. I mean, he was smoking pot. He was doing some things he shouldn't have done, and the public reacted. And look what happened to their share price. So sometimes you can look, just because you can be on social media, just because you can have a public persona, doesn't mean you have to share it all, or should you? Just like you go in a hospital gown, it shows some bad parts of you maybe you don't like to do, but you have it on, but it doesn't mean you need to show it. So cover it up and not display it, so to speak. And I think that's a really important part. Hey, I see another question about pay-for-play pieces and getting started about being published in a little bit of a digital footprint. Hey, I'm cool about that. I think that's okay. One is to be able to find that audience that you want to reach. And again, I think, is it Michelle, or Mia? Oh, Mia. Thank you, Mia. I think one of the cool things about using a pay-for-play is you want to get to the audience that you want to reach. And so sometimes you have to seed that audience, just like you want to have a good tomato plant so you can make some good pasta sauce or something like that. You got to plant a few seeds, you got to water it, you got to fertilize it. And so to do that, you got to go find some good ground. So there's nothing wrong with a little pay-to-play and getting your message out there. In fact, quite frankly, to be really good at it, you're going to have some pay to play. Facebook doesn't let you do that anymore. LinkedIn, you can do some of it, but you're going to have to start to pay to play. They're all going to have some aspect of pay to play. Now, you can call that sponsored ads. You can call it a lot of different things. But if you want to be in front of the right kind of audience, you kind of have to pay the piper.
All right. Henry Sue, we'll take a few more because we've got a lot out there. In terms of branding, how does the authenticity come out amongst all the noise in social media, and how does one stand out with conviction? Thank you, Henry.
Yeah, thanks, Henry. It's a good one. Just by being yourself. I'll give you a good example. Years ago, when again, I don't give you a Kodak example, but I'm known for this no matter what I do. The stuff you see me post is always about what I feel about what I do. That doesn't mean by posting, it doesn't have repercussions, because it can. Because there's some people who don't like my hunting stuff or my personal kind of convictions around certain kinds of rights that I believe very strongly in. That doesn't mean that taking a stand or doing some of those things doesn't have repercussions. But I'm known for being authentic of who I am. If you don't like it, I understand. Too bad. Don't follow me. I get it. But years ago, I was a CMO of Kodak. Someone wrote something very, very inappropriate about George Eastman, and said something to the effect of maybe you should put a gun to your head like George Eastman. And I wrote back on a very public tweet, bite me. And of course, you can imagine my corporate team rushed up to my office and said, you can't do that. It's a 130-year-old company. It's got George Eastman behind it, the stature of the company, blah, 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 blah. And, and I said, but they were rude. And they said, well, you have to be nicer. So I said, okay, fine. So they left, and then I wrote, please bite me. So, the key is to be yourself. And I think that's a great thing to kind of keep in mind. By being yourself, you don't have to remember that you weren't, and it just stays true to who you are. And I think people appreciate that.
This is one more from me. In terms of putting out a tweet or writing something, a lot of people say that maybe you should write it, walk around the office, and then look at it again and make sure you want to send it. Can you talk about what you do to make sure that you're not shooting from the hip or doing something too quickly without thinking?
Yeah, I think as a CEO, as a leader of any company, I don't know if I would use the word filter. I guess you could say filter. I don't like too many filters, but I think it's important to have good guidelines, good parameters for, or good conditions of satisfaction about how you want to do things. We have conditions of satisfaction around our goals, the revenue we want to drive, the profitability we want to drive, the market share we want to drive, levels of customer satisfaction, levels of employee engagement, all the way across the board. So I think it's important for you to really have a good sense of who you are and what you're about before, you act. Because sometimes we are all human. We will get caught up in that, and that's not always a good thing. And so it's real critical to have, a kind of an A to Z of what we want to be and who we want, and can we stay true to ourselves inside of that? Because if you can do something very negatively to impact your stock price, you could do something very negatively to impact your shareholder value, to impact employee morale, or customer engagement or customer loyalty. So it's very critical, I think, Greg, to be very grounded, in the way in which you say. Again, I use another great example of where we at the company I was at, they used our name in a rap song that used the N-word. Oh, wow. And right away, everybody wanted me to condone it. Well, you can't condone, some things and praise others. So what we did say is what we would do is recognize the use of an iconic name like Kodak in everything that was done, but doesn't mean we would endorse it. Okay. And so therefore we had a good way of being able to do it. So I didn't have to ping pong to this one, ping pong to this one, ping pong to this message. And by doing it in that manner, it got everybody settled down. And so, but critical. I mean, you imagine, we could have, what makes one, by the way, that song had over like 4 million downloads in a month. So, it was a very iconic song about, a Kodak moment being used in a song that had a very negative word, in today's vernacular. It's not something you'd want to have.
Well, I think the Paul Simon and Garfunkel song Kodachrome probably was better for the brand.
Yeah, well, it depends. I mean, if you're trying to change and be more reflective to the community, you could say that indeed is part of it as well. So it's just a matter of where you're at on that brand. For that young rapper who had a really big hit song, whatever you want to call it. I'm not of that genre, but you have to recognize that for him, that was his Kodak moment. For Paul Simon, that was their thing over here. So you have to recognize those things, but you have to have, again, you have a good moral compass, a good brand compass to be able to navigate that.
All right, I think this might be the last one because we're going overtime.
Yeah, we're in overtime. This is great. I love it. Hope it's been helpful for everybody.
But I think along those lines, and maybe you can sum up after this question, is that I guess what you're saying is it takes just a bad tweet or a bad comment to lower a stock price or end a career, but you want to curate your brand as the CEO over the course of a lifetime. So you have your identity with the company, and you have your own personal identity, and you want to curate that personal identity over the course of a lifetime. And that includes taking a number of thoughtful steps over the course of your career. So just comment a little bit on that, and then you can take it away and wrap it up from there.
Well, I think it gets really back down to what are your own personal conditions of satisfaction. And what is it you want to drive, as a professional, as a CEO? So those are some key questions for you to be able to ask yourself in terms of what is it I want to be when I grow up? What is it I want to be as a professional? How do I want to best be represented? What will be my legacy as a CEO? And by doing that, that will help you form the kind of leader you want to be. In my brand new book, which is coming out very soon, called The Hero Factor, we find that those companies that lead hero cultures, we find great hero leaders. And the value of those companies based upon their value that they live and practice every single day in the business leads to greater value of the company itself. They perform better, they have happier customers, they have happier employees, they have great vendors. I mean, there's a whole bunch of things that go along, as opposed to the asshat companies or the wannabes, the do-gooders, or even the bottom liners, which we identify in the book. And so it's very important to be able to figure out what the core set of values that you want to drive and those conditions of satisfaction. So Greg, I want to reiterate and thank everybody for joining us today for the C-Suite Executive Briefing of the C-Suite Network, and also to remind everybody, go to claimyour.ceo and not only get yours as a CEO, but get the company. Again, here's another great example. Why don't you put your brand name .ceo up there too, and that goes right to the CEO. That's a great way to be able to say, I'm standing behind the brand. You want to reach me, here's my brand.ceo. That's my address. You can reach me 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, in a way of which to be able to be positive, and then also own your own name. I think both of those are great examples, and I appreciate the opportunity to come and talk to each of you. If you want to reach out to me, you can do so. You can find me at jeffreyhazlett.ceo. Thanks, everybody. Cheers.